Okay, students, welcome to my Voyant Tools narration video. I hope to make this as clear and simple for you as possible so that you're able to grasp the uses of Voyant and how it can be helpful for you in performing literary analysis work. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background to tools like Voyant. There's a branch of disciplines within the humanities known as the digital humanities, and this means that we are using computer-generated tools to analyze texts, to create mapping, to basically perform the work within things like English, history, anthropology, and to utilize the power of computers in our work in these fields. In the English and literature fields, for example, these digital tools have been used for a variety of purposes, including disputed authorship of texts. They're actually able to use computer tools in order to figure out who actually wrote certain texts that the author wasn't sure about. They're able to trace things like the author's style and to look at the different shapings of literary history. They're able to solve long-standing disputes and mysteries, and these tools also allow us to look a little bit more closely into texts and to see exactly what's going on. So one of the things about literary studies that might be difficult, especially for non-majors, is the lack of sort of quantifiable data or information. And what tools like Voyant allow us to do is actually come up with quantifiable data to support our analysis of the text. So instead of coming up with, let's say, a hypothesis that isn't backed up by specific numbers and data, we actually can pull that. So what Voyant Tools does is it's a very simple student and user-friendly tool that looks at the most common words in the text, how they're used, where they're used, what is the context, and the point of using tools like Voyant is to see how the author's language choices are shaping the meaning of the text, and we can actively see that through the use of the words. And the whole thing behind using a tool like Voyant is that nobody's going to sit through a document and count all of the different words. That would take you too long. So basically what the computer does for us is to do things that we can't do ourselves. So that's a little bit of the background, and I'm now going to demonstrate how you use the tool. So the first thing that you want to do when you're using Voyant is to find your text. And Voyant calls it a corpus, which is just a fancy way of saying a bunch of text. And for the purposes of this demonstration, I've chosen one of Jonathan Swift's most famous poems called Verses on the Death of Dr. Swift. And I'm going to go fetch it over here. And you see I've already copied and pasted it. I have not included the author name or the title of the poem. So I'm just going to click Control-C, pop back over here to Voyant. And I'm going to do a little copy paste, Control-V, and all of the text has gone into the tool, and I'm going to click Reveal. So this is what pops up into the screen of Voyant, and it looks a little bit confusing, but what we are going to do is talk through each of the different parts. The first thing that pops up is called a word cloud. That's this little fancy, colorful little guy over here, and you might have seen word clouds before. And the whole point behind a word cloud is that the larger the word is, the more times that particular word is used in the text. So let's hover over Dean, for example, and we can see that Dean is used 16 times during the text. And this makes sense because Dean is actually how Dr. Swift referred to himself. He was Dean Swift of the cathedral. That was his title, was Dean. And then we can see words like friends were used 12 times, good were used 10, dead 9. Another thing that we can see is how the words were used in context, like where exactly they were used and how that they were used. So for example, if I want to see how they were used in context, I'm going to go down here where it says contexts. Then I'm going to click on this little list here, and the most common words are going to pop up. Of course, this doesn't want to work. Hello, there it is. And I'm going to see exactly the times that Dean was used within the text. So we're actually able to see where the sentences are and how the words were used in those sentences. And what that allows you to do is to think about exactly where and how those words are being used. Another thing that we can tell is exactly where in the document these words are being used. So what I'm going to do is eliminate context here, and let's say that I want to see where the words are being used in the parts of the document. I'm going to click on Friends. And so what you can see here is roughly a visual of how many times Friends is used in different parts. And I'm not going to get into the math here. The relative frequencies in the document segments are a little bit more too complicated than what we need here. But basically what you can say is like, okay, so he's using Friends in the beginning. He uses it a decent amount in the beginning, and then he doesn't use it so much. And then more towards the middle and the end, he's using the word friends a lot. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look exactly at what these words are saying about this document. But before we do that, we need to look at a concept called stop words. And so the reason that we use stop words is that sometimes the most frequently used words in the text are not the most useful to us. And I'm actually going to use the word Dean as an example, because that's kind of like a substitute for his name. And to me, in my opinion, the names of characters don't really tell us all that much because obviously the characters are going to be mentioned a lot of times. So let me show you how to create your stop words list. And you might ask yourself, what is a stop words list? So a stop words list is a list of words that the program doesn't count, and we can actually control that. So if we look over here above the word cloud, and we are going to hover our mouse until a little tool comes up and it says define options for this tool, and we're going to click on it. So right now the stop words list is auto detect. So what that means is that the tool is automatically eliminating a lot of these really common words that are used in English that don't necessarily tell us much about the document. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to write Dean, and I'm also going to write M-E-M, because if you see it's a little light over here, but that's just almost an abbreviation for them, and to me that also doesn't tell us very much about the poem itself. So I'm going to click on Save, and then I'm going to click Confirm. So now as you see, our word cloud changes a little bit with taking out Dean and taking out M. So the most common words right now are friends, good, and dead. So again, you can confirm that by hovering your mouse over the different words. So to me, these are really significant words in this poem. So the poem is titled Verses on the Death of Dr. Swift. So to me, what these words are showing is that Dr. Swift, or Jonathan Swift, is reflecting upon his death. And obviously, we see that with the word dead. And he's thinking about the parts of his life. He's thinking about friends. He's thinking about things that were good. So let's again look at one of these words in context, for example. Let's look at good and see what this tells us about the poem. And of course, it doesn't want to work for me right now. Here we go. So we're going to see how he's using good in what parts of the poem. Which way my death can do them good, for example. I'm going to click on another one. That I doubt is no good sign. His stomach too begins. So it's being a little slow up here, but you can still read the complete context down here. So what I want you to come away with the demonstration of this tool is that, number one, don't be confused or shy about the amount of things that are popping up on the screen. It's actually not that complicated for the purposes that we are going to be using. The main things that you're going to focus on is the word cloud over here to see the frequencies, the use of the words in context, that means how the poet is using the words, and if you want to, you can look at the document segments to see exactly the places that those words are being used. But if you don't want to do that, then you can just focus on what are the most common words and how they are being used. So if I were to use these words to write a brief summary of this poem and the themes, I would talk about how the things that Dr. Swift is most reflecting on as he's approaching his death, and he's talking about being dead, is his friends and the things that they did for him in his life. If you don't find anything interesting about those most common words, for example, you can also look at some other words that are used a lot, such as pride, kind, way. All of these different words, year, he's obviously being very concerned with the passage of time. Thought, 6 times is used. So what I want you to come away with is a sense of exploration and a sense of play as you're looking at these works in the context of the Voyant tool. I want you to think about using this tool as a way to explore the poems and explore the works that you're going to put in. You're not going to come up with something right away. You're going to want to do a lot of clicking around, a lot of playing. Definitely edit your stop words list by going up here once again. See different combinations. You might compare contrast two works, see what the most common words in between those are, or you can choose to focus on a single work. But basically the whole point of doing this tool is to allow us to do that literary analysis that is the whole point of this class. That's the whole point of looking at literature, of making an argument, of looking at what the work is telling us. But what we're able to do here is use a computer program in order to aid our analysis and give us specific evidence of what we can talk about with the poem or the work or whatever you're looking at. So there's also other tutorials online for using Voyant. They tend to get a lot into the nitty-gritty and a lot into functions that we really don't use. Like I said, really the functions that I would suggest focusing on are looking at the word cloud, looking at the counts, and looking at the words in context and how they're used in the poem and seeing what those tell us. So I hope that you enjoy playing with Voyant tools, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with.